does it take to escape a high-security prison? Intelligence, planning, or pure luck? From McNair's smooth-talking deception to El Chapo's underground tunnel and the Alcatraz mystery, these daring breakouts defied the impossible. The Great Escape of Richard Lee McNair. Prison walls are built to keep criminals inside, but history has proven that some individuals will go to extreme lengths to break free. While some escapees rely on brute force or elaborate tunnel systems, others use deception, intelligence, and sheer confidence to walk away from captivity unnoticed. One of the most remarkable examples of this is the story of Richard Lee McNair, a man who escaped from prison not once but multiple times, with his final escape cementing his place in history as one of the most cunning fugitives of all time. Richard McNair was born in 1958 and raised in Oklahoma, growing up under the roof of a law enforcement officer. Ironically, despite being the son of a police officer, he chose a different path, one that led him straight to a life behind bars. In 1987, he was convicted of murder during a botched robbery in North Dakota. The crime was brutal. During a break-in at a grain elevator, McNair shot and killed truck driver Jerry Thies, who happened to be at the scene. Arrested shortly after, he was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 30 years for burglary, attempted murder, and murder. McNair's first known escape attempt came in 1992 when he tried squeezing through a prison ventilation duct. It was not an easy feat, and he managed to break free from the North Dakota State Penitentiary. However, he remained at large for only a year before authorities tracked him down and brought him back into custody. This was not the end of his escape attempts, far from it. If anything, his failure only taught him that brute force alone was not enough. He needed a better plan, and that plan would unfold years later in one of the most sophisticated prison breaks in modern history. By 2006, McNair had been transferred to the United States Penitentiary in Pollock, Louisiana, a high-security prison known for housing some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. Unlike his first attempt this time, McNair understood that force was not going to get him out. He needed a strategy that would allow him to leave unnoticed, and he found his opportunity while working in the prison's mailroom. His job was to repair torn mailbags, a seemingly mundane task that offered him the perfect cover for what would become a brilliant escape plan. Over time, McNair carefully constructed a makeshift escape pod by sewing several large mailbags together and positioning himself inside. He also fashioned a small breathing hole to ensure he would not suffocate while being transported out. On April 5, 2006, when the time was right, he climbed into the escape pod and waited. A prison forklift, following routine procedures, transported the bags, including McNair, out of the prison gates and into a storage warehouse. At that point, all McNair needed was patience. He remained hidden until he heard the warehouse workers leaving for their lunch break. Once the coast was clear, he emerged from his hiding place, dusted himself off, and walked away as if he were a free man. There were no alarms, no sirens, no immediate realization that a prisoner had just left the facility in broad daylight. McNair had done what many would consider impossible. He had literally been carried out of a maximum security prison. What happened next is what truly sets this escape apart from most others. Several hours after his escape, McNair was walking along a railroad track when a police officer stopped him for questioning. By this point, authorities had already begun searching for the escaped inmate, and McNair fit the description perfectly. Dressed in casual clothing he had stolen along the way, he had no identification on him. By all logic, this should have been the moment he was caught, but McNair had one last trick up his sleeve: his ability to talk his way out of trouble. The conversation between McNair and the officer was later released as a recorded exchange, revealing just how smooth and convincing he could be under pressure. When the officer asked for his name, McNair calmly replied that he was Robert Jones, a roofing contractor from Minneapolis. He explained that he had been jogging in the area as part of his routine and had only arrived in town a week ago. The officer continued questioning him, asking if he had any identification or if he could verify his address, but McNair kept his composure, weaving an elaborate yet believable story. Despite the officer's suspicions, McNair managed to maintain an air of confidence that made his lie convincing enough. He even laughed when the officer pointed out that he matched the description of the escaped inmate. The officer eventually told him to carry identification in the future and let him go. Just like that, Richard McNair, a convicted murderer and high-risk prisoner, had successfully deceived law enforcement and continued his journey toward freedom. McNair remained on the run for 18 months, traveling across the United States and even into Canada. During this time, he adopted multiple aliases and maintained a low profile, avoiding detection for longer than most escapees ever do. He was finally captured in October 2007 in Campbellton, New Brunswick, Canada, after a sharp-eyed police officer recognized him from a wanted poster. He was extradited back to the United States and placed in the Florence Administrative Maximum Facility in Colorado, one of the most secure prisons in the world, where he remains to this day. Richard McNair's escape is remembered not only because of how he got out, but because of how he managed to stay out for so long. His ability to think quickly, adapt to situations, and manipulate others with charm and intelligence made him one of the most fascinating prison escapees in modern history. While many criminals use force or elaborate schemes, McNair proved that sometimes all it takes is a convincing lie and the confidence to sell it. While McNair's escape relied on deception, confidence, and luck, others have gone to extraordinary lengths, using sophisticated engineering and criminal networks to make their getaway. One of the most infamous examples of this is the escape of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, a drug lord whose escape from a high-security Mexican prison stunned the world. Unlike McNair, who relied on improvisation, El Chapo's escape was a meticulously planned operation that took months of underground work and millions of dollars to execute. The underground mastermind. Richard McNair's escape was a masterclass in deception. With nothing but confidence and quick thinking, he managed to talk his way out of a police encounter and extend his freedom for over a year. However, while McNair relied on improvisation, others have gone to extreme lengths to plan their escapes months or even years in advance. Few cases in history demonstrate this level of preparation better than the escape of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the world's most notorious drug lord, who orchestrated an elaborate prison break that left authorities stunned. Joaquin Archivaldo Guzman Loera, better known as El Chapo, was the head of the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most powerful and violent drug trafficking organizations in the world. His operations extended across multiple countries, earning him billions of dollars and a fearsome reputation. Despite multiple arrests, El Chapo had an uncanny ability to slip away from authorities, making him one of the most elusive criminals in modern history. His most famous escape, however, took place in 2015, and it was unlike anything seen before. Before diving into his daring tunnel escape, it is important to understand El Chapo's background and why he was considered such a high-risk inmate. He was first arrested in 1993 and sentenced to 20 years in prison in Mexico. However, this was merely a temporary inconvenience. In 2001, after 8 years behind bars, he escaped in what seemed like an absurdly simple yet effective manner by hiding inside a laundry cart. Bribing prison guards had long been a part of the cartel's playbook, and El Chapo used his vast network of influence to ensure his release. For over a decade, he remained on the run, reinforcing his power as the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. In February 2014, El Chapo was recaptured by Mexican authorities in the coastal city of Mazatlan. This time, he was sent to Altiplano Federal Prison, Mexico's most secure facility, designed specifically to house the country's most dangerous criminals. Officials assured the public that this time, there would be no escape. However, they had underestimated the sheer level of coordination, engineering, and financial resources El Chapo had at his disposal. While behind bars, El Chapo's cartel members worked tirelessly to construct an underground escape route that would make history. Over the course of several months, engineers and construction workers working under strict secrecy dug a tunnel from a safe house located about a mile outside the prison. But this was no ordinary tunnel. It was a feat of underground engineering. The tunnel stretched approximately 1 mile in length and was remarkably well equipped. It featured a ventilation system, electric lighting, and a custom-made motorcycle attached to rails, which was likely used to transport both workers and the enormous amount of dirt excavated during its construction. The level of precision was astonishing, as the tunnel was dug to align perfectly with the small shower area inside El Chapo's prison cell. The placement of the tunnel was deliberate, as the shower was one of the few areas in the cell not covered by security cameras. On the evening of July 11, 2015, surveillance footage from inside El Chapo's cell captured a moment that would shock the world. The drug lord was seen pacing back and forth before kneeling near the shower area. Moments later, he simply disappeared. It would take guards several minutes to realize what had happened, but by the time they entered his cell, he was gone. Authorities quickly discovered the tunnel beneath the shower floor, leading to the realization that this had been a carefully orchestrated operation. The entrance was a small 2-foot square hole that descended into a ladder, leading directly to the underground passage. The tunnel's exit point was inside an unfinished cinder block house located in the middle of a rural area far from prying eyes. By the time officials arrived at the site, El Chapo had already vanished. The escape was a complete humiliation for the Mexican government. El Chapo once again had proven that no prison could hold him. His ability to manipulate systems, pay off the right people, and plan with military-like precision made him an unstoppable force. The manhunt that followed was one of the largest in Mexican history, with authorities scrambling to track him down before he could fully re-establish control over his cartel. For 6 months, El Chapo remained on the run. Rumors of his whereabouts spread across Mexico, with some claiming he had fled the country while others believed he was hiding in the mountains under the protection of his loyal cartel members. His capture finally came on January 8, 2016 in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. A joint operation between the Mexican Navy and law enforcement stormed a hideout where El Chapo had been staying. In a desperate attempt to flee, he used a series of tunnels to evade capture but was ultimately caught trying to escape through a manhole. This time, Mexican authorities made sure there would be no third escape. El Chapo was swiftly extradited to the United States in 2017, where he faced trial on multiple charges, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and murder. The trial revealed the full extent of his cartel's reach and influence, with witness testimonies describing the massive amounts of money El Chapo spent on bribery, corruption, and intimidation. In 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was sent to the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, also known as ADX Florence in Colorado. This prison, often referred to as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, is considered one of the most secure facilities in the world. El Chapo's escape from Altiplano Federal Prison was an extraordinary display of planning, coordination, and power. Unlike McNair, who relied on deception and wit, El Chapo's escape was the result of an underground network of engineers and cartel members working with incredible precision. The sheer scale of the operation demonstrated the lengths to which criminal organizations will go to protect their leaders. While El Chapo's escape showcased the influence and vast resources of a global drug empire, other legendary prison breaks relied more on patience, determination, and ingenuity. One of the most infamous examples of this is the 1962 escape from Alcatraz, where 3 men attempted the impossible, breaking out of the most secure prison in the United States and vanishing without a trace. Their fate remains one of the greatest mysteries in history. The Alcatraz Mystery. El Chapo's escape demonstrated the power of wealth, influence, and careful engineering. But not all great prison escapes involve elaborate tunnel systems and financial backing. Some rely purely on determination, patience, and resourcefulness. One of the most famous prison breaks in history took place in 1962, when 3 men attempted to escape from Alcatraz, the United States' most secure and inescapable prison at the time. Unlike El Chapo, these men had no outside network, no cartel members digging tunnels, and no guarantee of success. All they had were homemade tools, months of preparation, and an unwavering belief that they could do the impossible. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, known simply as The Rock, was designed to be escape-proof. Located on a small island in the middle of the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay, it was surrounded by strong currents that made swimming nearly impossible. The prison's high walls, strict security, and remote location made it the last place anyone would expect a successful escape. Between 1934 and 1963, 36 inmates attempted to escape, but most were either caught, shot, or drowned. Officially, no one had ever escaped until the night of June 11, 1962. The masterminds behind this daring escape were Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. Morris was an exceptionally intelligent prisoner with a reported IQ of 133, and he had a history of escaping from other prisons. The Anglin brothers were bank robbers from Florida who had been incarcerated together since childhood and had an extensive history of attempting breakouts. The three men realized that Alcatraz, despite its reputation, had weaknesses that could be exploited with careful planning and determination. The escape plan took months to execute. Each night, the men used stolen spoons, saw blades, and other makeshift tools to chip away at the ventilation grates in their cells. To avoid detection, they covered the holes with cardboard and paint, making it appear as though nothing had changed. As they dug, they carefully stored the debris in their pockets and secretly scattered it outside during their daily walks in the prison yard. Behind their cell walls was an unguarded utility corridor that led to the rooftop, providing a potential path to freedom. Knowing that escaping Alcatraz meant more than just getting out of their cells, the men needed a way to cross the bay. They began stealing raincoats from other inmates and slowly stitched them together to create an improvised inflatable raft. They also crafted life vests to keep themselves afloat in case the raft failed. To buy themselves extra time, they constructed incredibly detailed dummy heads using soap, paper, and human hair, stolen from the prison barber. These decoys were placed in their beds so that when the guards did their nightly bed checks, they would not immediately realize the prisoners were gone. On the night of June 11, 1962, the escape was set in motion. Morris and the Anglin brothers squeezed through the holes they had dug in their cells and entered the utility corridor. Moving carefully, they climbed a network of pipes and made their way onto the prison rooftop. From there, they scaled down the outside wall and slipped into the cold waters of the bay. Using their makeshift raft, they disappeared into the darkness. By the time the guards discovered the deception the next morning, the men were long gone. The prison immediately went into lockdown, and an intense manhunt followed. Boats, helicopters, and search teams scoured the bay and nearby shorelines, but no trace of the escapees was found. Authorities insisted that the men had drowned, pointing to the strong currents and frigid temperatures that made survival unlikely. However, their bodies were never recovered, leading to one of the greatest mysteries in American history. Over the years, several pieces of evidence have suggested that at least one or more of the escapees may have survived. In the 1970s, reports surfaced of sightings of the Anglin brothers in South America. The FBI dismissed these claims, stating that there was no definitive proof. In 2013, a letter reportedly written by John Anglin was sent to the San Francisco Police Department. In the letter, he claimed that he and his brother had survived the escape, but that Morris had drowned. He also wrote that he was suffering from cancer and was willing to negotiate a deal with authorities in exchange for medical treatment. The authenticity of the letter remains unconfirmed. The official stance of the United States Marshals Service is that the case remains open. The escape from Alcatraz has inspired countless theories, books, and even movies, with many still debating whether the men perished in the bay or managed to start new lives in hiding. The prison itself closed in 1963, just 1 year after the escape, due to rising operational costs and security concerns. Today, Alcatraz stands as a museum, attracting millions of visitors each year, with the story of its most famous escape remaining one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history. Unlike El Chapo, who had an entire organization working on his escape, Morris and the Anglin brothers relied solely on their own ingenuity and determination. Whether they lived or died remains unknown, but their story proves that even the most impenetrable prisons can have weaknesses. While this escape remains shrouded in mystery, another infamous fugitive took a completely different approach. Instead of tunnels, rafts, or deception, he chose a method that seemed straight out of an action movie: escaping by helicopter. The Helicopter King. The escape from Alcatraz remains one of the most debated prison breaks in history. Whether Morris and the Anglin brothers survived or not, their ingenuity in bypassing the highest level of prison security left a mark on law enforcement agencies worldwide. However, not all escapees relied on tunnels, deception, or makeshift rafts. Some chose a far more dramatic route, one that involved taking to the skies. Pascal Payet, a French criminal with a history of high-profile heists, became infamous for his daring helicopter escapes that defied the expectations of prison security systems. Born in France in 1963, Payet was involved in organized crime from an early age. By the 1990s, he had established himself as a key player in a series of violent robberies, particularly targeting armored vehicles. In 1999, one such heist went horribly wrong. While attempting to steal cash from a security van in Marseille, Payet and his gang got into a violent confrontation with guards. A deadly shootout ensued, leading to the death of a security officer. Payet was later arrested and sentenced to 30 years in prison for his role in the crime. Unlike many escapees who spend years plotting their breakouts in secret, Payet took a more direct approach. In 2001, just 2 years after his conviction, he staged a bold escape from Luynes prison near Aix-en-Provence. His method? A hijacked helicopter. With the help of accomplices on the outside, Payet's men hijacked a helicopter from an airfield and forced the pilot to fly to the prison. The aircraft landed directly on the prison roof, where Payet and another inmate who had been selected as his escape partner climbed aboard. Within minutes, they were airborne, leaving the prison guards stunned. The entire operation was executed with such precision that by the time authorities realized what had happened, the helicopter was already gone. The escape drew massive attention, both from law enforcement and the media. Payet instantly became one of France's most wanted criminals. For 2 years, he remained at large, using his network to evade capture. However, his time on the run ended in 2003, when authorities tracked him down and arrested him in Spain. Instead of learning from his mistakes, Payet doubled down on his notoriety. That same year, while still a fugitive, he helped orchestrate another helicopter escape, this time for 3 of his former cellmates from the very same prison he had escaped from 2 years earlier. French authorities were humiliated. Payet had proven that not only could he break out of prison himself, but he could also help others do the same. When he was finally recaptured and returned to prison, authorities knew they had to take extreme precautions. From that moment on, Payet was classified as a high-risk inmate. To prevent another escape, he was transferred between different prisons every 3 months, never staying in one location long enough to establish another breakout plan. Despite these measures, Payet had one more grand escape left in him. On July 14, 2007, during France's Bastille Day celebrations, he pulled off what would be his most daring and well-coordinated helicopter escape yet. That afternoon, 4 armed men stormed an airfield in Cannes, hijacking a helicopter and taking the pilot hostage. They ordered him to fly to Grasse prison, where Payet was being held. At precisely the right moment, the helicopter descended onto the prison roof. The armed men quickly disembarked, cut through security doors using heavy tools, and freed Payet within minutes. As prison guards scrambled to respond, the helicopter lifted off, disappearing into the sky. For months, authorities conducted a nationwide search, trying to track Payet down. Unlike previous escapes, he managed to stay off the radar for a significant period. However, his luck eventually ran out. In September 2007, he was arrested in Spain, marking the end of his legendary string of helicopter escapes. French authorities, determined never to allow another escape, took no chances. Payet was placed under the highest level of security, kept in solitary confinement, and routinely moved between undisclosed locations to ensure that no escape plans could ever be set in motion again. His helicopter breakouts remain some of the most daring and sophisticated prison escapes in history. Unlike other escapees who relied on deception, tunnels, or makeshift tools, Payet used brute force, outside coordination, and precise timing to achieve his freedom. His ability to exploit aviation weaknesses led to increased security measures across European prisons, with some facilities now implementing no-fly zones to prevent similar escapes in the future. As incredible as Payet's helicopter breakouts were, his story is far from the only legendary prison escape. While some escapees relied on external help, others used nothing but psychological manipulation and their own wits. One of the most astonishing examples of this is Frank Abagnale, a con artist who managed to walk right out of a maximum security facility, not with a helicopter, but with pure deception. The con artist who walked out. Pascal Payet's helicopter breakouts were a bold display of brute force and external coordination. But not all legendary prison escapes involved armed men and hijacked aircraft. Some required nothing more than intelligence, quick thinking, and an uncanny ability to manipulate those around them. One of the most astonishing prison escapes in history was pulled off by a man who never needed tunnels, tools, or helicopters. Frank Abagnale, one of the world's most infamous con artists, walked right out of a high-security detention center using nothing but deception. Frank Abagnale Jr. is best known for his incredible ability to forge checks, assume false identities, and evade law enforcement across multiple countries. His exploits were later made famous in the book Catch Me If You Can and its Hollywood adaptation starring Leonardo DiCaprio. By the age of 21, Abagnale had already posed as an airline pilot, a doctor, a lawyer, and a college professor, all without any formal qualifications. His ability to manipulate people into believing his lies made him one of the most elusive criminals of his time. In 1969, after years of successfully conning banks and businesses out of millions of dollars, Abagnale was finally arrested in France. He served a short sentence in Europe before being extradited to the United States, where he faced multiple charges for fraud and forgery. By then, his reputation as a master con artist had made him a high-profile prisoner. He was sent to the Federal Detention Center in Atlanta, Georgia, where authorities believed he would be securely locked away. But Abagnale had other plans. His escape was made possible by a simple yet brilliant stroke of luck. At the time, U.S. prisons were under increased scrutiny from congressional committees investigating corruption and mistreatment. As a result, prison officials were often visited by inspectors from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. One day, when Abagnale arrived at the facility, the U.S. Marshals who transported him failed to provide the necessary paperwork confirming his prisoner status. Without official documents identifying him as an inmate, some of the prison staff mistakenly assumed that he was one of these federal inspectors. Recognizing the opportunity, Abagnale decided to fully embrace the misunderstanding. He carefully observed the behavior of prison officials and noted how real inspectors carried themselves. He acted confidently, dressed neatly, and began to complain about the prison conditions, just as an official from a government oversight agency might do. Slowly, he ingratiated himself with the staff, making them believe that he was someone of authority rather than a convicted fraudster. Realizing that he needed outside help to make his escape believable, Abagnale reached out to a friend he had met before his arrest, a woman who had no criminal record and was not under suspicion. He convinced her to pose as his fiancée, and under his instructions, she created a fake FBI identification card for him. She also secured a business card for a real FBI agent, which Abagnale later used to further solidify his ruse. With everything in place, Abagnale took the final step in his plan. One day, he casually informed the guards that he needed to speak with an FBI agent about an important matter. Flashing the business card, he claimed that his contact would be arriving soon to pick him up. The guards, believing that he was indeed a government official, did not question him further. Then came the moment of truth. When his friend arrived outside the prison, pretending to be the agent who had come to retrieve him, the guards simply allowed him to walk out the front door. No alarms, no breakouts, no chase. Frank Abagnale had just executed one of the smoothest escapes in history, all without using force or intimidation. For weeks, authorities had no idea that Abagnale had disappeared. By the time they realized what had happened, he was already miles away, once again living under a new identity. He remained on the run for a few months before being recaptured in New York, where he was finally sentenced to 12 years in prison for his crimes. Unlike many escapees, Abagnale's story did not end behind bars. After serving only 5 years, he was offered a deal by the U.S. government. Recognizing his unmatched ability to detect and exploit weaknesses in financial security, the Federal Bureau of Investigation recruited him to work as a consultant in fraud prevention. Over time, he became one of the most respected experts in the field, helping banks, corporations, and law enforcement agencies combat financial crime. His career took a dramatic turn from con artist to crime fighter, proving that even those who break the law can sometimes use their skills for good. Abagnale's escape was one of the most remarkable in history, not because of the method, but because of how effortlessly he manipulated those around him. Unlike Richard McNair, who used deception in a moment of crisis, or El Chapo, who relied on an underground network of engineers. Abagnale's entire plan hinged on one simple concept: confidence. He walked into prison as a convicted felon and walked out as a free man, simply because he understood how people think and how to exploit their assumptions. His story is a testament to the power of persuasion, proving that sometimes escaping prison is less about physical barriers and more about knowing how to make others believe in an illusion. While history has seen countless daring breakouts involving tunnels, disguises, and helicopters, few have ever matched the audacity of a man who convinced the system to let him go without a second thought. From McNair's smooth-talking deception to El Chapo's million-dollar tunnel, from the mysterious escape from Alcatraz to Pascal Payet's airborne getaways, the greatest escapes in history have revealed one undeniable truth: no prison is truly escape-proof. Whether through sheer determination, elaborate planning, or psychological manipulation, these fugitives found ways to defy the odds. Even as prison security continues to evolve, human ingenuity always finds a way to push the limits. Perhaps, somewhere in the world right now, another escape is being planned, one that will go down in history as the next great prison break. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.